I'm now going to share my screen and let me jump into the presentation so we can get through some things and then open the floor up to some questions and answers. So I'm going to, again, John already did the introductions here, so I'm going to go into just my agenda, which is what is GTRI and how is it different between Georgia Tech that you might already be aware of. Talk about differences between grants and contracts, faculty differences, security and IT, and then talk about the Workforce Development Task Order that GTRI and TCRDF collaborated on. And then Dr. Charles Dermesant, who's on the call, he's going to talk about our specific DART internship program and our IRAD. And then Dr. George White from Georgia Tech will join us about collaborating with Georgia Tech. So I was a student at Georgia Tech, and it took me a long time to figure out the difference between Georgia Tech and GTRI. So I just kind of wanted to show something here. When you think on the left-hand side, Georgia Institute of Technology or Georgia Tech, you think of an educational institution. They do fundamental research. It's an open environment. It's about, entrepreneurships and startups. It has students and faculty and classrooms and everything. GTRI is this interesting thing that falls within the institute, but it's a special case, and there's only about 14 or 15 of these types of institutes around the country. So it is within the bigger Georgia Tech, but it's the applied research arm of it, and it does a decent amount of their work on with the Department of Defense. Typically, and there's exceptions, we do other activities as well. We have typically U.S. citizens, and it's about technology transfer of that information. So both of these things we're going to cover, but I really wanted to talk about the right-hand side, which is where Charles and I are from on this call. So the left-hand side, mostly the left-hand side does grants-based research from, say, National Science Foundation. The right-hand side does contracts directly with the federal government, either Department of Defense, Department of Energy, intelligence agencies, and the like. So our mission, we are a university-affiliated research center, nonprofit applied research arm, and we have several key elements about what we're trying to do: enhance the economic impact for the state of Georgia, serve national security, improve the human condition, and also educate future technology leaders, not just students on campus, but we also set up short courses for people within the government and the Department of Defense to continue education beyond, further into their life. And it took me a little bit while to understand what a UARC is, and I might, from now on, reference it in that term, UARC. But it's a research center that's affiliated with a university. So if I read it backwards, research center that's affiliated with a university. So it's Department of Defense associated. It's established under the Secretary of Defense, and the reason it's established is it sets up and makes sure is that specific capabilities are maintained. So we can't be bought or sold. And we're not allowed to just like pick up and move to another country or something like that. Because of that, we are allowed sole source funding from DoD, which is rather powerful. And we also may compete on other science and technology work, but that sole source funding, if it's in our swim lane for what we do, and it meets a DoD requirement, we can present white papers and get funding. So that fourth bullet is pretty interesting, I think. If you want to know about our workforce, there's about 3,000 of us in total. So if you look at, and we're all state of Georgia employees. So within the greater Georgia Tech, within the whole institute, we make up about 30% of the workforce. 2,000 researchers, 500 support staff, and 500 students at any given time. So, and then if you look at our breakdown years of service from 0 to 11 plus years, there's equal breakdown there. We're definitely mostly in the millennial generation, but you can see how things between Gen Z, Gen X, and baby boomer, And then we, a lot of master's degree, people with masters in our organization is probably the most predominant. So in terms of things we work on, within the Department of Defense is maybe these first three. We work on sensors, and that includes, different things about, electro-optics and stuff like that, and our radio frequency sensors. We do a lot with intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, robots and autonomy. And then information, we have a lot of things such as cyber control, providing the DoD with decision superiority, and then data sciences. And then for systems, we deal a lot in the aerospace, air and missile defense, test and training, and then technology for society, educating future leaders, again, enhancing the economic impact for the state of Georgia and improving the human condition. We do a lot of things like within Georgia, there's a great poultry industry. We have some interesting research that we do to support the poultry industry in Georgia, and also like wastewater cleanup and PFAS removals, those forever chemicals. So there's a lot of, it's not just DoD centric. There's other things we touch on that are, and of course the DoD is, concerned about the environmental impact of their bases around the U.S. and the world. So technology for society is a very big umbrella in and of itself. So there's a lot that goes on under that fourth column there. We are separated. So these are the things that we do. How we're organizationally structured is we are organized into 8 labs. Myself, I'm in this bottom one electro-optical systems lab. Charles Demerson, who's going to be on the call and talking in a little bit, he's from the electronic systems, or was in the electronic systems lab. He's now in our chief technology office organization. So these are the labs that execute some of those different technologies. The labs work, semi-autonomously, but then there's a lot of cross-lab collaboration. GTRI also has a footprint. So as you can see, our headquarters is in Atlanta, Georgia, but we have field offices all around the country, and as well as in Hawaii, and then within Stuttgart, Germany. So we have mostly a domestic footprint, but we also have locations elsewhere, so that we have these field offices that if they're nearby one of the schools that we may have on the phone, there's you can use our, in collaboration, you can meet at our facility, maybe use some, equipment or IT infrastructure if that's the case. So there's a decent sized footprint around the country. I wanted to get into the contracting comparisons, and so what I wanted to talk about is GTRI does federal contracts. We fall within the federal acquisition regulations. Invoicing and billing can be complex, and there's items in there that are contract line items. Typical university, like on the Georgia Tech side, there are more federal grants. The funding is an annual lump sum. There's effort reporting, and invoicing. If there's a work breakdown structure, it's, like on the right-hand side, it's hard for a typical university to invoice based upon federal things, federal invoicing and complexity things. So your typical university does well and is set up for handling grants, but they have some difficulty transitioning to handling federal contracts. So that piece, if you wanted to expand in the federal contract space, that's something that, you need to think about how you're going to handle contracts and your invoicing and your, how you document the expenses and so forth. So that's something that, you need to consider. But between GTRI and TCRDF, this is a solvable problem. It's not that hard. But it means, though, that if it's not that hard if you connect up with someone who's already doing it and knows how to do it and can show you where your gaps are and how to close those gaps. Faculty comparison, our faculty is dedicated to performing applied research. And what I mean by that is, typical universities do fundamental research where they discover something, they write a paper, they present it at a conference. For GTRI, we take that research that Georgia Tech does, the traditional Georgia Tech, and we then apply that technology towards a specific government or Department of Defense need. So we might develop a prototype, and we develop how that, or we show our sponsors how this technology can be applied to solve their specific problems. But our faculty is typically dedicated to research. We do have teaching opportunities, and a lot of our faculty, we are considered faculty, but a lot of our faculty has joint appointments between the applied research side and the campus side for performing basic research and basic/fundamental research. Most of us are U.S. citizens, and we do have or we're capable of obtaining a security clearance if needed. That's not completely required for working with the DoD. So, and I'll get into that in a little bit. So typical university, your faculty has significant teaching responsibilities, and they're trying to do teaching and research at the same time. But sometimes faculty are they're sometimes overbooked on teaching, and you may not have the option. If you have a windfall of research funding, you may not have the option to what's called, buy out of your teaching requirements. So I know some institutions, if a faculty member gets a significant amount of research funding, they can, quote, buy out of their teaching assignment to dedicate more time on their research. And so there's some flexibility there. And then, of course, typical universities, you have a lot of foreign national faculty and students, which Georgia Tech does. And we recognize that, but we have sort of the appropriate firewalls to make sure that we manage that and control it. Security comparison, GTRI is identified as a cleared defense contractor. We have required positions that look at insider threats. We have a security officer and someone representing, IT for our, information systems. And we have, a technology control plan and a system security plan. Typical universities, a lot of times there's open research facilities, open source IT processes. And a lot of it is about, presenting things in open literature and doing the research and presenting that. GTRI has that flexibility, but sometimes we have to be concerned about what we do present at conferences and what papers we do publish and how we publish them. So IT and research security concerns. So what I wanted to show is there's, with different levels of work, you've got your typical university, Georgia Tech and GTRI on the far two right columns, but every organization can do fundamental research, can open source and support that. When you get into ITAR, which is International Traffic in Arms Regulations, you need to be concerned that only U.S. persons have access to that data. Typical universities need to develop a technology control plan. For Georgia Tech proper, big Georgia Tech, it's not part of their normal procedures, but can support ITAR. GTRI by default does. There's something called CUI, which is the information is unclassified. So I'm highlighting that middle term. The U stands for unclassified, but you still need to have some amount of control built in. Of course, GTRI by default handles that. For Georgia Tech, it's not part of their normal procedures, but they can support it. A typical university may need to develop, standards for that, and GTRI and TCRDF can help close that gap. So let me just stress that a lot of universities right now might be on the call is typically doing this fundamental research for, say, National Science Foundation, publishing everything, and you're in this sweet spot right here. But if you want to have access to more work, there's a decent amount of work in these two center rows right here, ITAR and controlled unclassified. And the barriers for it, as long as you understand them and cross that threshold, you can tap into potentially a lot more research dollars out there if you just do certain things here in rows 2 and 3. That's something that I definitely want to stress. The classified portion, This is where it gets very tricky. Of course, GTRI again is set up for it. Georgia Tech needs to, if they want to do something, there's a lot of coordination invested that has to happen with our research security. And for an institute that might not be currently doing classified work, I'd recommend, first tapping into all of the opportunities in rows 2 and 3. And there's significant opportunities there, and you can build up your research portfolio and tap into a lot of different sponsor bases within the Department of Defense and other government agencies. And if you like that, you can just stay in that realm. You don't ever have to go classified. But if you see the demand to eventually go that way, then of course GTRI and TCRDF are here to help you, incrementally go along the way. And as you go down in more and more stuff, GTRI and TCRDF can help you with that. So I wanted to talk about this diverse workforce development contract that was awarded back in December of 2020. It was 5 years period of performance. It was funded by the U.S. Army, and I might use the word DevCom, but it stands for Development Command, or Combat Capabilities Development Command. So when we got the contract from the U.S. Army, it was awarded to GTRI, but under the assumption that GTRI would work with TCRDF collaboratively. And the reason that that was demanded by our sponsor was because they realized that GTRI by ourselves would not potentially be successful in terms of being able to reach out to these different universities. So TCRDF opened up a lot of doors for GTRI to interact with, just like this call. And collaboratively, GTRI and TCRDF developed a lot of engagements and collaborations that sprung from that. And the other thing is TCRDF has an impressive advisory board that's comprised of several retired generals from the Department of Defense, amongst other people in industry. And that advisory board allowed not only the HBCUs, but also GTRI to, was a holistic engagement with the Department of Defense. We have our sponsors that we're used to talking to, but TCRDF's advisory board really elevated us to another level of engagement that we didn't have before, and we were greatly appreciative of that. So that was a multi-year effort that we had that I think was significant. And it ended, but there were a lot of things that happened last calendar year. A lot of things were in flux. I believe that as things, there's a lot of priorities and a lot of moving pieces happening, but I do believe that the Department of Defense liked the work that TCRDF and GTRI did together. And I think there's potential for that to be, for us to re-engage in that in the future. The next 2 slides, I wanted to hand this over. So the next piece, I'm going to hand over to Dr. Charles Dermesant to talk about a few things, and then I'm going to hand it over to, and I can maybe drive the slides, and if either of them want to present their own, they can. But here's some things that I want Dr. Charles Dermesant to talk about, and then Dr. George White from Georgia Tech proper is going to talk about a few items with respect to the broader Georgia Tech. And I think between the two of them, you're going to see a much bigger holistic engagement. This is not just about GTRI, but the big Georgia Tech is overall. So with that, I have a few, like 2 slides here. Charles, if you wanted to maybe talk and I can drive as you talk, is that fair?
Yeah, that works. All right. Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. So I think Tom did a great job of kind of comparing and contrasting, between GTRI side of the house versus Georgia Tech. What I'm going to talk about for a little bit are some of the ways in which we collaborate with some of the emerging research institutions. One of the ways you see listed here is the DART program, Defense University Applied Research Traineeship. Before I get into that, I think it is important to stress, why there is a need for a program such as this, for a relationship such as this. So, DART is a program where GTRI is trying to step into the role of a mentor in order to kind of help these emerging research institutions, um, come to the table in terms of getting some of these contracts with the Department of Defense. So it kind of builds that relationship where the institutions we partner with can leverage some of our expertise and some of the knowledge. There's things set up such as video lessons, things like that, on how our infrastructure works in terms of research security, in terms of contracting, things like that. So it's a pretty important relationship that goes there. But I think the reason why it's so important, if you look at GTRI, our history, founded in 1934, a little over 90 years ago. But we started out small. Tom showed the chart where we're kind of this big organization with thousands of researchers spread across 20 field locations across the country. But if you look at our story, it didn't start out that way. In 1934, it started out with 13 people, part-time research faculty, right, with I think like a $5,000 grant back then. And over time, it grew. If you look at kind of our trajectory in terms of funding, most of that growth was linear for a large period of time. It wasn't until about 15, 20 years ago where we really started hitting some exponential growth and really expanded into this organization that we are. So what we're hoping is that in partnering with these institutions, what we can bring to the table is some of that background, some of that knowledge that we've accumulated over the 90 years. And, things aren't perfect. There's also, I'm sure, a lot of missteps along the way, pitfalls that we probably fell into or narrowly avoided. So if there's something there that we can help these institutions as well in avoiding those as well, it's better to benefit from us without having to make those same mistakes yourself. So that's why I think relationship like this is important, and we're glad that DevCom set this up so that we can kind of step into this role. And the whole goal of this program and really all of our research efforts is to help the emerging research institutions understand this research landscape. As Tom kind of laid out, there's a lot that goes into it, a lot of infrastructure that needs to be built up in order to do it correctly. But the goal is to truly become partners, right? So the contracting relationships, whether we're the prime and emerging research institute subcontracts or vice versa, it's about leveraging each other's strengths and expertise, however that best fits for our DoD sponsors and our other sponsors as well. So you can see these DART programs partnering with Alabama A&M and Tuskegee. Those have been going on, and I think a real success story there is with Alabama A&M and their ERIs Foundation, how they've created the infrastructure that's putting them on the path there as well. And hopefully we can kind of continue to not only serve this mentor role, but also transition into true partners. So that's what we're looking forward to as the ERIs Foundation kind of grows and keeps on going. So I think maybe if we go to the next slide. So one of the other ways that we try to partner outside of the DevCom contracting vehicle and the DART program. So I sit in the office of the Chief Technology Officer. So GTRI, as part of these contracts, we're allowed to charge a fee, a small percentage off the top of all the contracts, all the work that we do. So there is a regulation in there that allows us to do the internal or the independent research and development, the IRAD. And that's a way for us to invest internally and be a little bit strategic so that we can address not just today's problems, but look ahead 10, 20 years from now and see what our sponsors are going to need down the road. So with that, a lot of that goes back internally to our labs that Tom pointed out, our 8 different research labs, so that they can lay out kind of roadmaps that they can look at for their sponsors. But we do also do some strategic investments, and part of that is partnering with some of the emerging research institutes. So we've done that kind of recently here in the past. We see some of those listed. Now, the IRAD efforts, they run, fiscal year to fiscal year. They can run over multiple years, but there's a hard accounting stop in terms of closeout every fiscal year that we have to do. So funds don't actually carry over. There's new funds allocated each year. But we've been fortunate to be able to partner with some of the institutions, like I said, that you have listed there. Now, the key with IRAD is that it is a small percent of the budget. It's a small fee that we're able to take in comparison to all the things that we do. So what it's really meant to do, both in our partnerships with other institutions and even internally, is to provide a spark, get collaborations going, get ideas a little bit more mature, a little bit more formulated, so that they can grow into sponsored programs and sponsored contracts. So it allows us internally to be a little bit more entrepreneurial. And I think our researchers really benefit from that. If there's some line of business that they can see may be promising, they can do a little bit of investment in that, maybe grow that into a branch and eventually a lab that employs a lot of people. And working with external organizations like some of the emerging research institutes, it gives us a start at creating some of the research collaborations. And I think it's been really helpful there for us in partnering with some of the HBCUs just to get the research relationship going so that they can, go out, win other grants, win other contracts, and win other awards. So the only downside of that, unfortunately, is, like I said, it's not large. It doesn't carry over from year to year as much as we would like. But it does give a little runway, and it can help provide a spark to start the fire. But the goal is to, transition to those more sustainable DoD contracts. I think, is that all the slides you have for me, Tom? Or?
For you, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so thanks, Charles. And so that ends with Charles and I are from GTRI, but I wanted to introduce Dr. George White. And I just have a one high level slide, George, if you wanted to if you have slides of your own, but I kind of want to just give an overall, like Dr. George White. I'll just give an introduction. He's our executive director of strategic partnerships and the chief of the CHIP strategy officer. And he's also, year after year, he's hosted these conferences here in Atlanta. We have our HBCU CHIPS Network conference that's next week, and it's covering these different areas. But with that, I wanted to sort of cue you up, George, and just introduce you and give you the floor. Over.
Absolutely. So good afternoon, everyone. So I think I know a number of you that's already on the call. And as Tom mentioned, I serve as the executive director for strategic partnerships, and I'll be brief. Part of that, responsibility is doing outreach to HBCUs and emerging research institutions. Our focus in the office has primarily been with the HBCUs, and so this is an activity that became prioritized by our former executive vice president for research, Chawi Abdallah, and now the mantle has been taken up by Dr. Tim Lewin, to continue this work. And as Tom just showed, one of the activities, the HBCU CHIPS Network, which TCRDF was an original part of. There was a kickoff meeting that we held in 2024 at the Department of Commerce, and as it related to the CHIPS and Science Act. And so we've grown from a few institutions to over 30 HBCUs that are now a part, of the HBCU CHIPS Network. We certainly would love to have, more HBCUs that are part of this. One of the things that we have done during that period of time is actually organize ourselves into multiple regions with anchor university partners, right? And we've done fairly good as it relates to winning contracts, funding that were competed by the federal government. As you guys know, things have kind of slowed down a little bit with the change and direction as it relates to CHIPS Act. And so we're still trying to navigate those waters. But like Tom said, we are meeting with our second annual conference here in Atlanta, April 1st and 2nd. So if you're interested in attending, please let me know. We'll go ahead and get you a complimentary registration and would hope to see you there. The other thing that I will also mention too is we just finished what's called the Research Collaboration Forum that was held in November. I think some of your institutions were represented there. And in that regard, we focused on generative artificial intelligence. And so we had a number of, good panels that talked about things as it relates to energy, infrastructure, sustainability, health and wellness, and obviously, semiconductors and microelectronics. And basically that is an activity that's focusing on capacity building as well as collaboration. And part of the outcome of that is to fund seed grants, right, that would allow for the institutional capacity building at the HBCUs, but also to position the schools and the teams to go after much larger federal funding opportunity. So for those of you who were aware, we will be announcing the winners next week after the CHIPS and Science or HBCU CHIPS Network Conference. And again, really looking forward to, working with you if we currently are not. And so I will stop right there, Tom. Thanks for allowing me the opportunity to speak to the group.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you. I just have one or two more slides, and then we please stay on, George, for any Q&A. So what I wanted to conclude with is GTRI has been in a partnership with TCRDF for over 5 years. And TCRDF, Georgia Tech, and GTRI has I think a proven track record of holding, partnership events, trying to ensure successful execution on federal contracts, DoD engagement, along with not just GTRI's organization, but leveraging TCRDF's advisory board, as well as understanding contracting, IT and security requirements, and then Dr. Charles Dermesant talked about our DART program as well as our IRAD program to motivate collaborative research between GTRI and other institutions. And then Dr. George White talked about the HBCU CHIPS Network Conference. Dr. White is doing more stuff. I can't keep up with it. This could be like a 4-hour presentation on everything that Dr. George White does, but I tried to keep it streamlined within the time frame here. But with that, I think that's the end of my slides. And I wanted to, I'll hand it over now to Dr. McCarty for, Dr. White, Dr. Dermesant, and myself are here to answer questions or anything else for this group. Over.
Well, thank you, Tom and George and Charles, for your presentation. A couple of things I want to say before we open up for Q&A questions. By the way, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat right now. I'd like to, first of all, say and acknowledge Mr. Jim Garrett. Mr. Garrett is one of our advisory board members that you may not have seen or seen a lot about, but Jim Garrett is really the spark plug behind our advisory board. He brought most of the people to our advisory board, and Jim has been a steady source of advice and direction and support since the inception of TCRDF. So Jim, thank you so much for your work, your participation, and being with us today. Also want to acknowledge Dr. Lonnie Sharp. Dr. Sharp is with us today, and Dr. Sharp has been the prime representative from TCRDF to work with GTRI and he's been there to advise on both sides of the table. TCRDF acts primarily as an honest broker between partners. And Dr. Sharp has been there to speak with GTRI and there to speak with the HBCU partners that you saw listed earlier on one of Dr. Mars' slides. And Dr. Sharp has really, really been helpful in making that happen. Earlier, I mentioned the study that the National Academies did on HBCUs and research in the Department of Defense in 2022. The National Academies mentioned 3 particular challenges to HBCUs and ERIs. And the first challenge was weak knowledge transfer between DoD and HBCUs, meaning that a lot of the HBCUs understand how the department works, what the problems are, what the challenges are, and they can't offer the good solutions. I'd be willing to bet you on any given day of the week, there's a good chance that there's somebody from Georgia Tech or GTRI in the Pentagon learning what the Department of Defense needs. And they help determine what they need and help really the program managers flush out their needs, then they're in a better position to help provide the solutions that we just don't have. We just don't have that capacity. One of the second challenges that the National Academy has found is what they called underinvestments in their research infrastructure and support. The sponsor program offices in a number of HBCUs are truly, truly lacking, for lack of a better term. We did a study a few years ago, and we found that nearly half the sponsor program offices at HBCUs had 3 or fewer persons in their office. And in all of those offices, quite frankly, the director had 2 other jobs, either director of sponsored programs, director of the Title III program, and director of Title IX. So those program officers had less than 3 people. In some cases, the HBCU does not even have a sponsored program office, which means that the professors are themselves their own sponsored program directors, and they're required to find the opportunities, to develop the relationships with the program managers, to write the proposals, to manage the proposals, and teach 6 classes. And you just can't do that. And the third challenge that the National Academies found was what they call superficial and inequitable partnerships. Underinvestment in research infrastructure, weak knowledge transfer between the agencies, superficial and ineffective partnerships. Now, if an institution partners with Georgia Tech or GTRI, you immediately eliminate all 3 of those challenges. You immediately eliminate all 3 of those challenges because your partner has the experience, the knowledge, the connections, the relationships to help write very successful, very competitive proposals. And we're just so happy that we are partnering with GTRI and Georgia Tech to do those things. Put in one more plug for the HBCU CHIPS Network. They are doing some amazing things with Georgia Tech itself and for HBCUs. They're opening up opportunities and networks for HBCUs that HBCUs just did not know exist. And believe me, you may walk into the Pentagon on your own. They may recognize you and they will say, "Oh, welcome, come on in, let's have a conversation." You walk in there with Georgia Tech, you have instant credibility that's above and beyond anything that you have yourself, because Georgia Tech has been there since 1934, and they've been solving problems. And people like to stick with people they know, they trust, and they can rely on. And that's what we have in Georgia Tech and GTRI as partners. So I encourage all of you to reach out to us if you want those relationships with Georgia Tech and GTRI. Join the HBCU CHIPS Network and take advantage of all the things that they have to offer. Now, after that little commercial, we're open for questions. Do we have any questions? If you have some questions, go right, unmute and ask your question, or you may put your question in the chat.
We have one in the chat.
Okay.
Regarding the map shown, Dr. Charles, are there any potential opportunities to expand and work with HBCUs in Mississippi? Um, I'm thinking a consortium of HBCUs in Mississippi, such as Jackson State, Tougaloo, and others together. If not, how can you jumpstart relationships and partnerships with these HBCUs? I'm a graduate of the best HBCU in Mississippi, Tougaloo College.
That's
All right. Well, thanks, Dr. McCarty. So I think the key and why that map exists is really locating the DoD sponsor that's in that area, in that region. Um, if my memory serves me correctly, I think we have done work in that region before, for example, in the area of engineering resilient systems, with one of the Army Combat Commands down there. So, and that's why we have a lot of those field offices. We set up a presence right outside their gate, so we can be responsive, and we're right there. So I think that's the first step is, who's the DoD sponsor in that area, in that region, seeing what their needs are, and then matching the capabilities on both sides with those needs. So it's definitely possible, and I'm sure there's some commands down there in Mississippi that we could take a look at, and kind of do that matching of needs to capabilities.
Thank you for that response. Ben Larry, I'm with the Florida Semiconductor Institute. I just happen to be from Mississippi and happen to graduate from Tougaloo College, as Dr. McCarty said, the best HBCU in the planet. But what I did want to say is, if there's any opportunity for me to get involved and be a part of it and help, I'm more than happy to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Ben,
Brother
we were
Larry.
hoping to see you here in Atlanta next week.
Did I get an invite?
Yeah, you did.
I did?
Yep.
Hey, John. If I
You
was
always
a
in-
Cal, Hey, John. If I was a Q, I wouldn't have to ask that question. But since I'm a Catholic, I get why this is going.
All right, Brother Ben. All right. We'll connect you up. We'll give you honorary status.
There you go.
All right. There's a question in the chat, Tom. What is the best way to identify collaborative funding sources when think about assembling collaborative project with GTRI?
that's a great question. There are several different ways that opportunities come down, so traditionally we've built up relationships with our sponsors where then there's a continuing relationship, and as funds get appropriated to the Department of Defense every year, we continue that collaboration. But the idea would be, so that's the first part, and I'll get to a second one, but still in this first part, where it's continuing collaboration with an existing sponsor. GTRI works with them, but the idea behind what Charles is doing with our IRAD and DART programs is to foster collaboration with our researchers and those at HBCUs and other emerging institutions, research institutions, so that when the next fiscal year of money comes around, we now realize that, hey, we've established some collaboration with a specific university like Tuskegee or somebody, and we pull them into that next phase of effort and funding right there. And one thing I'd like to stress is that when Charles and I and others at GTRI visited all these institutions, two things that really stuck out were the faculty were so dedicated to their teaching and trying to do research. They're trying to wear so many hats. You can see their dedication. And two, when we got to meet the students, they were great students to interact with, and we really, like that opportunity to tap into and collaborate, not just with the faculty themselves, but to collaborate with the students. So part one of that, back to your question, is there's this ongoing year after year sort of engagement with our sponsors that tracks the allocation of DoD funding. But item two is there are opportunities that are posted out there where yourselves and GTRI are aware of what those options are that are still requests for proposals. A lot of the ones that GTRI focuses on are more on the contracting side and not grants. So if there's postings for requests for proposals for grants, GTRI doesn't necessarily go into them, but there are other opportunities, other transactional OTAs, other transactional authorities. It's like a new contracting mechanism, and there are things that are posted out there on FedBizOps websites that GTRI tracks, and you all are welcome to track them as well. So if you see something out there that is more in the contract, we can still do grants, which is fine, but a lot of our wheelhouse is on the contract, government contract. So if you find something and want to reach out to us, we're all about it. The more we learn about these different organizations and build relationships, if we see an opportunity where an institution can supplement what we do, then we will reach out to you all. And a lot of times, like TCRDF is aware of opportunities and their advisory board, so they can notify both of us, both parties. I hope that answers your question. Over.
Definitely. Thanks so much. Yeah, I was just thinking that, the timing is a really important piece of all of this, right? So thinking about when to establish the collaborations and then how to get out in front of some of the funding sources before they become available, so that you don't miss an opportunity, for example. Thanks.
Yeah, great point. And that's really where Dr. Dromsant's part comes in, to where once, part of those elements that under Dr. Dromsant's programs, they have already established the contracting mechanisms and the billing and the billing and the payments and all of that other infrastructure. So all the gears are turning, and we kind of now have all that working, and the researchers on both sides get to know each other. So that fosters a lot of it, so that we can jump right away when the opportunity hits, as opposed to doing cold calls.
I'd like to add to that. I would suggest that the partnership forming activities take place immediately, even before an opportunity is presented.
Yes.
Because you may find that between the two of you, there may be an opportunity for you, and Tom, I want you to talk about this too. If we could present a white paper on the UARC side that would be able to get funded, if we could find the attention of your UARC sponsor,
yes,
and come up with a solution for one of their challenges or problems, and we can get it funded that way. And getting back to Dr. Sharp spent a tremendous amount of time connecting the right researcher at an HBCU with the right researcher at Georgia Tech or GTRI. The partnerships, as you know, are not between institutions. We say a partnership between TCRDF and GTRI, but that's not the way they happen. The partnership really boils down to the relationship between two people. And if we get to know each other, get to like each other, get to respect each other, and find that there's some contribution that each can provide the other, then that's where you build your partnership. So I would suggest we start your partnership activities immediately if this is something that you're interested in doing. And then when the opportunity comes up, your partnership is already in place, rather than finding a partner to help you pursue an opportunity. So Tom, talk about a minute about presenting a solution to the UARC, and then see if the UARC will fund that.
Yeah. So we have a special contract vehicle that is entitled a University Affiliate Research Center contract vehicle. And because of that, the nice thing about it is there's no competition. If we put forward a white paper that says, Air Force, we know you have this problem, and between research being done here at GTRI and collaboratively at another institution, like Tougaloo or Tuskegee or Savannah or any of those, we can combine forces and the research that and build upon that and say, we believe that we can, demonstrate some capability collaboratively to show you or provide a prototype or some proof of concept. And once that white paper is submitted with a cost rationale, we just submit it over. And if they like it, then they can fund that on that contract vehicle. And it's not as if they have to make this broad call and assemble all these, proposals and rack and stack them. If the approach is well documented and well structured and the cost amount is reasonable, then that's the beauty of that contract vehicle that we have in place with the Department of Defense. Over. John, you're muted, I think.
Thank you, Tom. We have about 4 more minutes now. If you have a question or two, you can put it in the chat or not.
I'm Jim Garrett. Can you hear me?
Oh, Jim, yes,
Yes,
go right
sir.
ahead.
Yeah. Somehow my chat bar disappeared. Maybe it's because of my technical expertise. But at any rate, is it possible to get a copy of this presentation? I know you have it recorded, but I know a couple of people that are very much interested in this but could not make it. And one of them is a highly successful small business that has a mission to get involved with HBCUs. And John, you know about them, but I think they're
right.
Good that if they could actually see this.
Yeah, Jim, we will, this is being recorded and we will post it and we'll send you a link. We'll send out a link to the presentation. We'll take care of that. Do we have one last question or comment before we sign off for today? Well, I'd like to thank all of you for being on the call today. We will do additional seminars of this nature as we go forward. I would also like to acknowledge another one of our advisors on the call, Dr. Carl McCants is on the call with us. Carl, thank you so much for joining. We certainly appreciate your advice, your friendship, and all that you offer to us going in the past and going forward. Thank you, Carl. Thank you, Carl. So that is it for today. We thank you so much for joining us. Keep your eyes open for another webinar coming up soon. And remember, if you have some interest in partnering with Georgia Tech or GTRI or joining the CHIPS network, you may contact us or you may contact any of the individuals from Georgia Tech or GTRI on the call today. Dr. McCarty, thank you so much for your work, and we look forward to seeing you all at the next time around.